Hello, and welcome to the Movie Mouth Film and TV Podcast, a podcast for all things movies, including news, reviews, and interviews, where we provide insights for listeners who are interested in or looking to make it in the movie business. We are extremely excited this week, and if you're a Tarantino fan, you should be too, because we have not one, but two entire sections of this week's show dedicated to his masterpiece, Pulp Fiction, including an exclusive interview with the casting director known for his work on the movie. Plus, we'll be reviewing some of this week's biggest releases from the likes of Netflix, Amazon Prime, and Video on Demand. But do you know the difference between Movie Mouth and other podcasts? It's the little differences. I mean, they got the same shit over there. Just here, it's a little different. As ever, this week I'm joined by the Jules to my Vincent, the Quarter Pounder to my Royale with cheese, the Gimp to my Zed. Yes, it's my very own favourite honey bunny. Please empty your wallets and don't make any sudden movements. Here's Phil.
Hello.
Hi, Phil.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm good, thanks. Very good.
So what have you been watching this week?
This week, so yesterday I watched the first episode of Snowpiercer, the Netflix series, the new Netflix series. So this is based on... originally it's based on a 1982 graphic novel of the same name, but then I think the series has been based on the 2013 film by Bong Joon-ho, who directed Parasite. I've not seen that original film. I think is it Chris Evans in that, I believe?
Yeah, Chris Evans and Tilda Swinton.
Have you seen it?
I have. I saw it, I think, when it came out. It's a strange movie. It came out in 2013, but it never actually had an official release in the UK, still to this day. It's an interesting property for them to remake into a TV show.
Yeah, I mean, I saw the trailer for it on Netflix and thought that looked interesting. Looked up my street. I like these kind of, dystopian thrillers. So yeah, what it is, it's based on a giant train that's got 1,001 carriages, so it's pretty big. And basically, the world's ended. They tried to fix global warming, and instead they broke it and froze the whole Earth. Is the story. And then everyone piled onto this train. It's got sort of like the elite of the world that paid, billions to get onto it, and then you've got the people at the back that they call tailors, which they sort of force their way onto it when the shit hit the fan, basically. And now, so you've got different classes on the same train, and it just spends its time circling round the globe and not stopping, as any good train would.
And you only watched the first episode?
I watched the first episode, yeah. Mm-hmm. So it's I really enjoyed it, actually, for the first one. I thought, a lot of character setup as they do in first episodes of things. But so it's got Jennifer Connelly. She plays the sort of train announcer, or the voice of the train. And then she's joined by David Diggs, who I can't say I've seen him in anything else before, and he plays Andre Layton, and he's a former homicide detective, and he's one of the tailors that sort of is looked down upon because he forced his way onto the train, and he's way back in the back where they sort of keep them basically prisoner, locked in and fed rations, but there's a murder on the train, and he gets
there's been a murder.
There's been a murder. And he gets taken out to basically investigate and try and solve this murder on the train.
Well, David Diggs, I think he was in the original cast of the Broadway production of Lin-Manuel Miranda's Hamilton. And he won a Grammy and a Tony for his performance in that. So I think he's also a musician. I think he also has some kind of rap group as well, and in the hip hop scene. So interested to see his performance in this, going from stage and music into a pretty heavy, it looks like, production on Netflix, right?
Yes, Netflix. It came out I think it came out this week. First, it's one of the ones where they're sort of. I think the first 2 episodes are available instantly, and then they're doing an episode per week.
We don't actually have it here in the US, but it's out. I know in Europe on Netflix. It's on TNT here in the US, so it might be one you
Okay.
have to check out on Hulu or cable if you have access to that.
Yeah. But yeah, recommend it so far. I'll stick with it. What about you? You
Very
been
cool.
watching anything new?
Well, rather depressingly, I'm now officially addicted to Netflix's reality TV show Terrace House, which I talked about a little bit last week. But this week, Kenny and Risako left the house, and I am devastated,
I have
as
no
you
idea
can
what you're
hear.
talking about.
I'm pretty sad that they left actually because they were the only two people that were giving any kind of fun or any reason to watch the show. But they have replaced them with two really interesting characters. So anyone that's watching that, I really recommend it. And I'm absolutely obsessed with this show. And I promise I won't mention it again because I'm almost at the end of it. But I think everyone should watch this just because of those little details between the dating scene that we're so used to and the dating scene in Japan. I also ordered myself this week an Oculus Quest, which is a virtual reality headset that you can use for gaming, but also for streaming films and movie content.
Yeah.
And I've been taking part in some kind of social watches of some movies in that, which is pretty fun and definitely a cool thing to do during quarantine. And also, funnily enough, I watched one of our movies actually in the Oculus Quest app for the Amazon Prime app, in fact, this week, which was awesome because I was laying in bed watching a 100-foot screen in front of me in
It's
my own
crazy,
personal
isn't it?
movie theater. Which,
I
yeah,
mean,
I mean,
we did the nerdiest thing possible. We met up in virtual. It basically felt like I was in Ready Player One when we met up in virtual reality.
we did. We were waving at each other and letting off fireworks and throwing them at each other. It was just like being back together again.
That's right.
So let's go to our listener question this week. Each week we ask our listeners for a movie related question. This week, our bat signal was answered by Jason Kim in Detroit, who would like to know: Hi, Phil and Miles. As a self certified movie and travel freak, many of the destinations I've visited around the globe have been inspired by the movies I love. Some recent examples are going to Budapest to visit a location for the Las Vegas casino scene in Denis Villeneuve's Blade Runner 2049. Although I wish I had Roger Deakins' film and lighting crew for my Instagram photos. The question is, what are your favorite movie locations that you've visited, and what are your dream locations that you still yet to go to? Phil.
That's a good one, isn't it? That's a good question. So for me, I ticked off one of these, and you're probably going to know what this is. A couple of years ago, when I came to visit you over in New York, we basically had a Ghostbusters extravaganza, and I managed to tick off visiting the Ghostbusters headquarters, which was amazing. The fire
Yes, we did.
station. We went to Dana's apartment near Central Park, didn't we?
Yes, we
And
did.
we also went to the restaurant that Lois Tully gets chased into by the terror dog. So it was awesome. Oh, and the library like entrance as well. So we managed to do like all of the Ghostbusters locations in New York. Well, most of them anyway. But
I
yeah,
love that, but
so
you really embarrassed me when you ran up to the conservatory at the restaurant, banging on the glass, screaming at all of the people eating their quiet dinners and lunches.
sliding down the window slowly.
You didn't have to slide down the glass. I mean, really.
Yeah, so that was one that's a massive tick off the list for me. I'm trying to think of another one. I think I would love to go to Alcatraz, not only because of Escape from Alcatraz and the sort of history around it anyway, but obviously, as you know, I'm going to say The Rock being set.
Welcome to The Rock.
So yeah, I'd love to go there, but I think there's like a massive waiting list to get on there though.
It's something like, I think, at least 6 weeks in advance. I've been to San Francisco. I've been to Alcatraz. I mean, I've been around it. Unfortunately, I went on a road trip and I didn't get a chance to book tickets before. So I've been on a boat that sailed around it. but I still haven't been on it. So maybe that's something that we can plan to do post-COVID. Get out
That
there and
sounds like a plan to me.
relive our Stanley Goodspeed fantasies. I've also visited many filming locations around the world. I remember one memorable night was retracing Anthony Hopkins' steps around Florence as he stalks his prey in that fantastic scene in Ridley Scott's Hannibal.
Mhm.
I've danced on the Joker stairs in the Bronx, along with everyone else that lives in New York, it seems. But my hands down most exotic location has to be Petra in Jordan, where, of course, the final scenes of Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade are filmed, which is the Grand Treasury, which is accessible by a tiny canyon, which regularly flash floods. But it opens up into this beautiful vista where you can see the columns and the fascia of the building have been carved by hand in the sandstone. But I can confirm that I didn't find a 2,000-year-old knight, but
That's
I
a shame.
definitely chose wisely when contemplating that trip. I'd say my dream destination it'd have to be Hawaii for Jurassic Park. Um,
Yeah.
Getting in a helicopter, flying through the mountains, wearing a full leather jacket, and talking about my love for chaos as per Jeff Goldblum.
There's no way you couldn't have the Jurassic Park like theme tune on a massively loud speaker while you're on the helicopter flying over
Yeah,
the scenery.
yeah, it'd be like Apocalypse Now, but instead of it being a kind of rock and roll tune,
Yeah.
it would have to be, or the Flight of the Valkyries. It would have to be John Williams' score.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But I'd also love to go to Tokyo and Kyoto to visit all of the awesomely filmed locations in Lost in Translation, which
Yeah.
is something I've always wanted to do. We're talking about that a lot now, so that's one I'm definitely going to book as soon as we're out of this COVID situation. So thank you very much for the question this week. Keep those questions coming. Please find us on Instagram at the Movie Mouth Podcast or on Facebook and send us an IM. We will happily look into answering your questions on next week's show. So, in the news this week, Phil, what have you picked up on with your radars, with your Bothan spies?
News. So it's sad news to start with. Learned today while I was writing up some notes for the show that Ian Holm had died today. Um, Ian Holm being star of, he's been in Aliens and Lord of the Rings, played Bilbo Baggins, and Chariots of Fire. He's known for those. But he's a great actor. But yeah, real shame.
He was an incredible actor. He made it to the ripe old age of 88, and which is impressive for anyone. I think obviously standout roles you mentioned in the Hobbit and of course Lord of the Rings trilogies. For me, I think it was his role in Ridley Scott's Alien, as you
Mm.
mentioned. And some fun trivia about that is apparently he absolutely hated, detested the taste of milk. And during his final scene in Alien, obviously with Ash as Ash, the kind of synthetic human, he has to kind of gargle a lot of milk, which is the kind of synthetic
It's
blood of
unfortunate.
this kind of cyborg, and yeah, he's kind of spitting that out, and apparently he absolutely detested it. That was his kind of underlying memory from that. But obviously, a lot of people will remember him as Bilbo Baggins, and how amazing he was in those movies. I also remember him in The Borrowers, I believe,
Oh yeah, yeah. I
when
forgot
I was
about
a
that.
kid.
Yeah.
So yeah, very very sad news indeed. In other news, Zack Snyder's cut of Justice League just revealed an image from the original villain Darkseid, who was replaced by the rather crap, let's face it, Steppenwolf in the recut movie by Joss Whedon that hit theaters. Warner Brothers are actually spending between $20 to $30 million to help finish the director's original cut, including CG and effects. And apparently, according to Snyder, the movie that hit theaters only used about a quarter of what he filmed before he sadly had to leave the project due to some very upsetting family issues. And Warner Brothers are actually going to consider releasing the movie now in its new form as an episodic format on HBO Max in 2021.
Mm, that sounds like it could be good.
Sounds like movie fans finally got what they wanted, that's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, that's a lot of money to spend on it as well. But, it's going to make it back. That's great. So I checked out a couple of trailers this week. First one was Palm Springs, and this is a new comedy starring Andy Samberg from Brooklyn Nine-Nine and Hot Rod. I mean, I don't watch Brooklyn Nine-Nine, but
Hot Rod is an incredible
I've seen
film.
Hot Rod and I love it. I love that film.
Cool beans.
Yeah, Cool Beans, which is that. You just reminded me that is a very odd scene, but brilliant.
It depends what frame of mind you're watching the movie.
Yeah, it's true. So it stars him and Kristen Milotti, who was in Wolf of Wall Street, and she's in How I Met Your Mother as well, and lots of other things. So it looks like quite a fun and a lot more adult Groundhog Day type, stuck repeating the same day type comedy. And it's nothing new. It's been done, obviously, but this does look quite funny. It looks like they go a bit further with it, in a more adult way, and a sort of a lot more, in one of the scenes in the trailer, you can see them just running each other over in cars on different days. And I know Bill Murray does that a bit. He drives off a cliff, doesn't he, in Groundhog Day?
Yeah.
But yeah,
with Punxsutawney Tony Phil in the passenger seat.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so it looks like it could be a lot of fun, So yeah, I'm quite looking forward to that one. That's coming out on the 10th of July on Hulu. I saw that advertised. The other one I saw was so this is Train to Busan presents Peninsula. So the follow-up to the 2016 South Korean zombie flick Train to Busan. I think it's being marketed as Peninsula, this like that full title. So Train to Busan presents Peninsula, and it's set 4 years after Train to Busan takes place, and it just looks like a sort of decent. It's got those horrible zombies in it that are the super fast, scary zombies. The ones that you really wouldn't want to encounter. Not the slow, shambling Dawn of the Dead type zombies.
Shaun of the Dead type zombies that you can throw your record collection at.
Yeah.
Including Bat Dance.
Yeah, just the people painted grey. But yeah, this looks like it. Yeah, it could be a lot of fun. Loads of crazy action in the trailer, so that's worth a look as well.
Is that coming to Netflix? Did you say?
I don't know. Actually, I didn't see where that was coming out. I don't think it was a Netflix one. No. I'd have to look it up.
I saw there was a trailer actually for a new Netflix show that's dropping on July 2nd, which is Warrior Nun. And this is a new 10-part show. It sees a group of young nuns fighting an ancient evil with swords and machine guns. It kind of looks like a mix-up between Zack Snyder's, mentioning him again, oft maligned sexploitation movie Sucker Punch, and Francis Lawrence's Constantine with Keanu Reeves.
Right.
And it actually looks like a lot of fun. Like from the name, I was ready to give it a miss, obviously, straight away.
Well, I wasn't. I was ready to jump on it straight away.
Yeah, but you never know with a name like that. It's a bit like Money Plane, isn't it? At the end of the day, it's so literal. Or Snakes on a Plane.
I still really want to see that.
Yeah, and we will be reviewing that. But it wasn't until the end of the trailer where you see giant letters that state how many fucks given, and then the response, none, spelled N-U-N.
I instantly love it.
At this point, yeah, I was done. So get me on board.
I mean, you got to remember, Miles, you're talking to a guy that when we worked at a record shop together, I bought a film purely on its title, titled Samurai Commando Mission 1549, which I still own to this day. I've only watched it once. I can't. To be honest, I can't remember much about it. I need to watch that again.
We were also extras in a UK-based kung fu movie called Brighton Walk.
Yeah. What was the full title, though? Do you remember?
Oh, can you remind me, please?
Brighton Walk, The Legend of Ganja Boxing.
We were in this scene where Phil, I think, threw me through something over a table or something.
It was like, yeah, through like a market stall table.
What the hell were we doing? I wasn't even paid to do that. Why did
No.
we do that?
Also, it sounds very extravagant. It wasn't at all. It was like a kind of table you get at like a yard sale. I just picked you up and threw you through it.
He really did. He really did. I still haven't seen the actual film, but I'm sure it's out there
I
somewhere.
do own it. I wish I didn't.
So that was the news, and this week we have not one but two reviews, starting with Amazon Prime's 7500. Phil, what do you think about this one?
So, this is. I watched this afternoon, and it came out today. And it's an action thriller directed in his feature-length debut, actually, by Patrick Volrath. So, yeah, new director. And it's about a terrorist plane hijacking. A group of guys try to take over the cockpit of a flight from Germany, which is manned by the captain and his co-pilot, which is played by Joseph Gordon-Levitt, making his return to film as well. He hasn't done
Hasn't been
film
seen
for...
in a while, huh?
No, about 4. I think it's his first film in about 4 years. He took
Snowden,
some time off.
maybe was his last film.
Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah, Snowden. I think he took some time off just to look after his family and bits and pieces. But yeah, it's good to see him back. So I think the thing that makes this very different, something I really enjoyed, is it's filmed almost entirely within the cockpit of the plane. So the only outside view that you get as a viewer of the film is through the security camera monitor that the pilots use to allow access or to see who's outside or knocking on the door of the cabin for security. So, and it's such a great effective use of the set. Basically, it must have been very odd to film, like being in that one sort of small space for long lengths of time. But apparently Gordon-Levitt trained for 2 months with actually his on-screen, the guy who plays the captain next to him, played by Carlo Kitzlinger, and he was a actual commercial airline pilot that turned to acting.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So, but I mean, you can see that it's paid off, because whenever they're doing, procedural stuff for the plane, and it just feels really, really authentic. Like, it does feel very good. And I'm sure it's been researched a lot, but yeah, having that real pilot there, I'm sure, was quite a help as well. So yeah, I think, as I was saying, what I find so interesting about it is the fact that the director's sort of getting you to essentially see everything from Gordon-Levitt's character's point of view. He's playing an American pilot that lives in Germany, but he doesn't speak German, which is sort of brought up quite early on. But in the film, a lot of the dialogue is in German, but it's not subtitled. So,
okay.
And as there's scenes in it where, I'm not going to go into spoilers with this or anything, but there's scenes in it where the hijackers are screaming at each other. There's lots of dialogue going on in German, and you really, really want to know what is being said as someone watching it, and you can just tell that Gordon-Levitt wants to know what's going on, but he doesn't understand. And in that situation where you're the pilot of a plane that's being hijacked, which is pretty intense, you can feel his frustration that he doesn't know what's being said or what the hijackers want, and it's great. It's a real good use of sort of not subtitling. It was a fantastic move, I think. It's just it's the most intense film I've watched in quite a while. It's only an hour and a half long, but it is it's full on for that sort of for that hour and a half. It's pretty edge of the seat stuff, definitely. Yeah, so that's a massive recommend from me for that one.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's out on Amazon Prime everywhere as of today, which is Friday, June 19th.
Yep.
Great. I'm going to have to watch that one over the weekend then.
Yeah.
This week I watched the Kevin Bacon starring You Should Have Left, which is David Koepp's new Blumhouse produced horror movie, where Kevin Bacon stars opposite Amanda Seyfried, who are a married couple with skeletons aplenty in their closets, who have decided to relocate from their stressful Hollywood lifestyle to the much calmer, tranquil climes of a modern house rental in the Welsh countryside, or so they think. So Bacon and Seyfried are incredibly strong in this. Clearly a safe pair of hands as far as the acting talent goes. And the young child who plays their daughter is an absolute revelation. Um, the story starts as a kind of fish out of water tale, not unlike The Wicker Man, whose overbearing shadow is everywhere on this. But where that movie smartly dialed up the weirdness until you could barely breathe, this movie's very much a game of two halves. So, it starts off where obviously we see our characters relocate to Wales. They move into this new kind of this new house that's been built less than 4 years ago. And as they kind of settle in, obviously things start to go awry. So no spoilers here, but I really believed in the relationship between the main cast. You feel that obviously this is a top talent production from the writing upwards. However, the second half does pull us into the more familiar headfuckery territory. Um, kind of as La Maison Terrible becomes more of a psychological horror. And the scars don't really feel earned. And an ending which doesn't so much as close the door, but slam it shut with a really abrupt bang. And, perhaps that's its downfall, as Koepp, does his best here to sprinkle some nice humor elements to the script. There's a really fun scene where Kevin Bacon visits a local shop for local people in the village and asks for some basic grocery supplies like bread and milk, etc. When the shopkeeper asks him if he'd like anything else, Kevin Bacon replies, "Sorry, I don't speak Welsh," even though he was speaking in English, which is pretty fun. But it is based on a novel, and I feel like like the plot and like the characters in the movie, it never really escapes the thresholds of its own source material. So I'd recommend this for a rainy day if you like movies along the lines of Secret Window, The Others, or Kate Blanchett in The Gift. But in general, I'm sorry to say this is a little bit of a miss for me. Our guest this week is a casting director who's worked alongside some of Hollywood's biggest players, including such diverse names as William Friedkin with To Live and Die in LA, Chris Farley in Beverly Hills Ninja, and one of Netflix's biggest hits with the young adult rom-com The Kissing Booth. But it's his work on 1994's Quentin Tarantino masterpiece, Pulp Fiction, that he's probably best known. Please welcome to the Movie Mouth podcast, Gary Zuckerbrod.
Hey, Phil and Miles.
Hi, Gary. Thanks for joining us.
Sure.
So, as you know, our podcast is here to help individuals learn more about the inner workings of movie production. Can you explain a little bit to our listeners what it means to be a casting director?
So, casting directors, we're one of the younger disciplines in filmmaking and TV. We came about in the 1950s. The independent casting directors came about in the 1950s after the breakup of the studios. Before that, we would have been what was termed talent scouts, going out and finding talent that the studios would have signed under contracts. When those contracts ended and projects needed casts, they found people who knew a lot of actors. Some of them were assistants to the directors, some of them were assistants to presidents. And in the late 1950s, early 60s, the independent casting director came about. Some of the big independent casting directors from that time were Marion Dougherty, Lynn Stallmaster, Mike Fenton. And these were sort of the names of the casting gods when I first started in the industry. So that's the history. Today, what a casting director does is we we are generally hired by the creative entity of a producer or director. Oftentimes, we're recommended by studios or networks to producers and directors. And what our job is to fill the artistic vision of what they see in each role with living beings. We, unlike an art director who can paint a wall and a set green one day, and the director can walk over and say, "Gee, the green isn't working. Let's paint it blue." And the next day it's blue, and then blue isn't working. I'll paint it yellow. Yellow, okay, yellow works. We're dealing with actors, and so we're dealing with the interpretation that a producer and a director have of a role, and then the interpretation that an actor makes on that role. And which actors we will present to producers, directors, networks, and studios to eventually fill that role and put a puzzle together. Because when you're putting together a cast, once you cast one role, or let's say there's a leading actor attached, everything changes a little bit in terms of who is surrounding that leading person. So that gives you an overview of what a casting director does on a very broad spectrum.
Sure, that's great though. So can I ask, how did you get your start in the industry?
Um, I I had gone into retail after I graduated college. I was living in New York, where I grew up. I was very lucky. My parents were great doers. We were always doing something. We were going to a Mets game, or we were going to a museum, or we were traveling somewhere. And I saw my first Broadway show when I was 9 years old. It was the original company of 1776. And I was just, that was it. I was smitten. And my older brother, who was a year and a half older than I am, used to take the Long Island Railroad into Manhattan on Saturday afternoons and see, or in the summer on Wednesday afternoons. And we would see everything. We would get twofers. We would get 2 tickets in the balcony for $4. And I, I mean, I would literally say hundreds of plays. And so when I was looking for a job after my retail fiasco, a friend of my dad's knew a casting director who was doing theater in New York and introduced me to her, a woman named Bonnie Timmerman. She's kind of one of the legendary casting directors now. You probably hate hear that me say that. But I worked for her for almost 4 years, and she was a great teacher. That's how I got my start in casting.
So what age were you when you sort of started that then?
I was 23, 24.
Oh, okay, cool. So, yeah, pretty early on then
Yeah.
Okay.
So, and then what happened was, when I left her, I got a job. William Friedkin was in New York, and the casting director who was doing his casting, it was casting the leads in New York, which, as I said, at that time, everybody wanted New York actors for the leads in their movies. And he really wanted a cast of unknowns for this movie, To Live and Die in LA. And so I was hired as the casting assistant, and we were bringing in all the hot actors at the time. William Peterson was out of Chicago. He was kind of attached right before I got on, but I knew Willem Dafoe from the Wooster Group, and John Turturro I had seen in Danny in the Deep Blue Sea, which was his major sort of entree into everybody knowing him in New York. It was an off-Broadway play by John Patrick Shanley. And we were just looking at, just all of these new, interesting faces. So I was asked to come out to Los Angeles to help complete the casting with the casting director. And I did, and I never intended to stay in Los Angeles. In 1984, Los Angeles was a very different place than it is now. And it wasn't to my liking. But the casting director who I was working for got offered a new version of The Twilight Zone at CBS that started shooting in 1985. And he asked me to be his associate on that. And I said no. And he kind of begged me. And I said, I'll stay until you find another associate. And about 2 months into it, he just boarded a plane and moved back to New York. And they made me the casting director. And it was
Wow.
one of the great opportunities because there were no series regulars. And, so I knew who Fran McDormand was, and Bill Peterson. I knew. So I asked them to do an episode together, and Joe Mantegna and Joan Allen. I thought, oh, that's a good pairing for an episode, and we got them. And Helen Mirren did an episode, and I
Wow.
bumped into Bruce Willis on the streets in Beverly Hills, and I said, hey, Bruce, I've got this great role in The Twilight Zone. Wes Craven's director. And he said, Gary, I love Wes Craven. So Bruce came in and did it. I mean, and I flew Nathan Lane out for a small part, and that it was great. It was great. It was just clear vision of whatever we thought was right for the roles. And then I just started getting jobs after that was over as an independent casting director.
That clear vision of, how to cast and who to cast, is an interesting one. And what I'd love to know is, how has casting changed in the last, 5-10 years with the emergence of, a saturation of content, more platforms, and an increase in diversity in roles?
Well, I was going to say the biggest change is, and which is just fantastic, is the incredible diversity in roles. And part of that is not only that they're writing roles that are for a more diverse feel in film and television and theater, but that the pool of actors has increased because the jobs are there.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what's really, it's the growth of and the depth that has really increased since I started. I cast the first co-production between NHK, which is Japanese public television, and PBS.
Mm-hmm.
It was the story of Edward and Haru Reischauer, two historical figures under the Kennedy administration. Edward Reischauer was the ambassador to Japan under Kennedy, and you can look up who they were. Haru Reischauer was they were celebrities in Japan, but I had to cast almost Haru Reischauer. We cast out of Japan, and there was a Japanese shadow director to the American director, but I had to cast an almost entirely Japanese cast, and my pool was pretty shallow. Today, it's so much greater. I mean, there's East-West players in Los Angeles where where Asian actors can get a start. The social stigma of being an actor in the Asian community has changed drastically. Parents aren't upset that their kids aren't becoming doctors and lawyers. So there's a sort of, and even a bit of a connection back to the roots of Asian theater. And it's just been amazing to see that change in the industry and how dedicated we all are to making casting look like the real world.
Yeah, I think that's the difference, isn't it? Really.
Yeah.
So, what would you say are the main differences between casting for TV and film?
These days, that line is getting smaller and smaller. For film, I mean, for traditional film, for a movie that's being released in a theater, which who knows what that's going to look like, but you still need that star name, that star marquee name, and to get people into buying seats. But it's changing a little bit. What has changed is that for television used to be the place that you discovered people, and film was the place that you put the stars that you had that grew up, and that kind of has changed. Now it's across the board because look, some of the broadcast um, shows are the quality is equal or superior to what's coming out in film,
Sure.
and with the you know popularity of the independent film world, you can have a small movie that has unknown actors or unknown to the public, and that movie can be a blockbuster hit.
Hmm.
Like Parasite. I mean, a blockbuster hit. It was the content, and I think audiences have just gotten more sophisticated about content.
Yeah.
So that increases the possibilities in casting.
Yeah, and I think one thing I'm super interested in this current climate is how does your role as a casting director um, help shape pictures or productions when it comes to diversity? So, what is your role in engaging with that production and suggesting options for the cast that would then present more diversity within those features?
Well, I don't think that's changed very much in the last 10, 15 years. It's really in terms of what the casting director's role is, we have to search, we have to do bigger searches if a role is specifically labeled. But it's casting directors have for a very long time always said to always looked for a different, a more artistic way to fulfill a role.
Mm,
And that could be okay, you have a scene in a hospital, um, and you have a parent who's dying in a bed. Well, nothing in that was specifically written white. Can that parent be Latin? Can that parent be Asian?
mm.
Can that parent be, African American? And you'd have that discussion with your producers. And that happened all the time. We were saying, how do we make this look more like the real world? How do we diversify this? You know, there were times where during I was casting a television series, and as the producers and directors said, just get us the best actors. So there was a great role. It was a series called Without a Trace, and there was an amazing role for a father who was missing. Their child was missing, and I said, guys, there's this. You all know who Charles Dutton is. He's that great stage actor. I just called his agent and said, by any chance, is he available? And do you think he'd be interested? And they said, if it's a great role, absolutely. And he got an Emmy nomination for that role.
Wow.
That's what a casting director's role is.
Yeah. Excellent. So, I understand from your IMDb page that you cast Uma Thurman in her first ever role.
I did. It was a movie called Johnny Be Good, and it was Anthony Michael Hall and Robert Downey Jr. Anthony Michael Hall was the big star at
Yep.
that time, coming off the teen flicks that he had done.
Yeah, the John Hughes movies.
Yeah, the John
Yep.
Hughes movies.
Yeah.
And so we had a really hard time finding the female lead. And my associate and I read, oh God, everybody. It was just, and nobody was getting what. I mean, this was a sort of rom-com movie, and just nobody was getting it. And I went to New York to look at actors in New York. We were shooting in Texas, but at that time you really didn't. If you were casting a movie, you actually sent the casting director to New York to look for actors, as well as looking in Los Angeles. And a friend of mine who was a manager said, I have this girl. She's 16 years old. She's done some modeling. She's an actress. I read her. I was just, that was it. She had the role. She knew what the role was. I took her over by cab to the producer and director who were in another hotel. And I said, you've got to read this actress. We read her. She left. They said, thank you. And they said, done, make a deal.
Great.
So,
And the
yeah.
rest is history.
And the rest,
as they say.
the rest is history. But the reality is, whether it was that movie or another movie, she was destined. I mean, she had something special. You knew it. I mean, as a casting director, my instincts were like, it was the hair on the back of my neck stood up because the talent, the energy, the individuality of what came across was just so special.
Yeah, you just knew.
So you've mentioned many of the incredible projects that you've been a part of. And as huge fans of Quentin Tarantino here at the Movie Mouth podcast, we'd love to know if you can tell us a little bit more about working with Quentin and how you got involved with casting Pulp Fiction alongside Ronnie Yeskel.
So Ronnie had cast Reservoir Dogs. And when I started in casting, Ronnie was the casting director's associate. Bonnie Timmerman was the casting director I started with. Ronnie was Bonnie's associate, and I was the assistant. And we just came from the same place of New York theater and New York actors, and had the same sort of training. So Ronnie, when Quentin asked Ronnie to do Pulp Fiction, she was doing another movie that was that had a lot of roles, and it was an animation movie, and she was doing a lot of roles. And she said, I'm not going to be able to give my full attention, but I know somebody who has exactly the same taste and training that I do, and he's a good friend. And so that's how I got involved with Pulp Fiction.
And how was it working with Quentin?
Oh, fantastic. I mean, again, this was a long time ago, but he was fun. He was smart. He had a point of view. He knew so many actors. He loves actors, and there's nothing like that when you're a casting director, to work with a director or a producer that just loves actors.
Yeah.
And so we would, like, there's an actress, Bridget Brana, who I have no idea what's happened to her, but she was in a movie. She was an Irish actor, and she was in a movie that had come out in the States. And so she happened to be in the States, and we were said, oh, we got to see her. And she came in, and Quentin was like, that's it, that's done. And there were lots of different stories. Like Ving Rhames, we had a very hard time casting that role. And so he was going to New York, and I knew Ving well from New York. And he, Ronnie and I said, you've got to see this actor in New York while you're there. And he did. And he said, done. That's the actor. And it was kind of like that through a lot of the film. The role that Bruce Willis played, Quentin had written it for another actor who couldn't do the part. And Bruce really wanted the John Travolta role, and he was committed to a Die Hard movie. And so one day we were talking, and we all said, well, what about making him the boxer? He's got a limited amount of time, and instead of being a younger boxer on his way up, we'll have him as a slightly older boxer on his way down. And those are the things that happen in casting all the time.
Yeah, so it just helps shape the story just by the actor that you put in that role. Yeah.
Well, and it's the timing of the right actor and the role coming together, and
yeah. And then with that, with Quentin, did he have certain people in that he just knew he had to have in that film?
Oh, sure. I mean, a lot of the roles um, again, I, it's a little tough for me. That was a long time ago, but so I don't remember all the stories. But Harvey Keitel, he had written that role for Harvey, and I think Frank Welly was a friend. So if I remember correctly, and so he wrote that role for Frank.
Right.
Um, and he was really set on John Travolta from the very beginning.
Okay. He's great in that as well. He's so good.
Terrific. Obviously, right now, Gary, we find ourselves in a changed world in all industries and walks of life. And of course, major movie and TV productions have been shut down for a very long time in response to COVID-19. But I wonder, what is the new normal for Hollywood productions in the coming months and years? And have you been instrumental in any of those kind of new normal processes for managing productions?
Well, nobody knows what the new normal is. We are in the process of each discipline, from the set caterers to the cinematographers to the grips to the camera people. We're all putting forward our what we see as the best way to protect ourselves to the combined studios. The studios are combined in the business sense through the what's called the AMPTP. It's the Association of Motion Picture and Television Producers. And anytime that you hear the writers negotiating for their contract or the actors negotiating for their contract, that's who they're negotiating opposite a table at. And so I happen to be on the board of directors for Teamster Local 399. It's the Teamster, it's the Hollywood Teamster Union. Mm-hmm. And the casting directors are represented there. So we have been working for casting directors to put together what would be the safest way for us to continue casting without exposing ourselves or actors to unnecessary risk. And I think that when it all comes down, that it will pretty much be virtual for casting actors. We do a lot of that now anyway. We do worldwide searches now, and I can do it from my desk in Burbank if I need to, and I've done it a number of times. You send out instructions to actors as to what you're looking for. They get the script, they get the sides. Sides are the parts of the script that we tell actors to read, and they put themselves on some format of taping, which we tell them to do, and then they upload that back to our offices or our computers, and we look at them. And then if we want to direct them, we set up Skype calls with them and give them direction, read with them again. And now with Zoom, we can actually record that reading and present it to the director, producers, studios, networks for a decision.
Yeah. I mean, just with technology like that now, it's just it's so easy to get sort of decent footage and just instantly send it to someone, isn't it? So
yeah, it is, and it's getting better. It just keeps getting better.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just amazing. You can be an actor and self-tape, as long as you put up a background that's a decent gray or blue, and you get a circle lamp which are inexpensive off the internet, and you can use your phone.
Yeah,
record it.
Are we going to see movies produced over? Are we going to see movies produced over Zoom, Gary?
I think we are.
How do you think that's going to change actual productions? Is there going to be restrictions keeping actors separated? And
I would imagine there will be restrictions. I would imagine they'll be figuring out how to, put, how to keep a crew as safe as possible. I would also imagine that crew members will be tested. This is just my imagination of what's going to go on, but yeah, it's and there'll be a little less production for a while.
Right.
Yeah. So next question: if you're when you're auditioning someone that's really well known for a role,
Mm-hmm.
how difficult is it not to take, or you know, you need to take into account obviously their previous work, but how much does that color your impression of them when you're casting for a role?
Well, usually if it's somebody well known, they're only coming in for the producer and director. They're not coming in. I mean, for the most part, they're not coming into a casting office and going on film with a casting director.
Right.
Um, I don't know how you separate out somebody's history, um, but the great thing about great actors is so many of them are chameleons. Whether we see it or not, they have the ability to play different roles, and we see them in different ways. Um, the best example of it I can give is one that I will never. I mean, this will stay with me. I think until my dying day. I was working. I was the associate casting director on the Pope of Greenwich Village, and Geraldine Page came in to read for the role that she was nominated for a supporting actress for in that movie.
Right.
And it was a mother of a sort of low life Irish gangster, and I had to read opposite her, which I, I thought I was going to just keel over. I was reading opposite, you know, Oscar winner Geraldine Page. And I turned around after we finished reading, and every person in the room was in tears.
Wow.
And I literally, I've only experienced it once or twice again. I literally felt an energy going from her to me. I know that may sound hokey, but I can't explain it any other way. It was just magic.
Sure.
Um,
That's
so,
amazing.
yeah. So, you know, what an actor has to do, and I'll probably be repeating myself a number of times on this. To prepare for an audition, an actor has to do their research, do as much research they can on the project. So if the project is coming from, say, Dick Wolf, you know, you look at what Dick Wolf has done in the past, and you'll see that there's an essence to it that you can keep in the back of your mind as an actor, to so that you know Dick Wolf probably isn't writing a rom-com sitcom. I mean,
Right.
there's a weight to it. There's a seriousness to it, and you so you know you have to be prepared as an actor. You have to do your research. You have to do your homework, and then you have to make a decision as an actor as to how you will approach that role and how you will present it to make it your own.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's what you need to do to walk into an audition. And then when you're in a casting director's office, you have to be open minded. You have to be able to listen when a director or a producer or a casting director says, that was great. Let's try it another way. Let's give that character a lot less menace and make him more approachable. Or let's give her there's a secret that she's keeping underneath. And as an actor, you have to take a moment and figure that out and internalize it into you so that it becomes an organic part of what you're doing during that audition. Does that make sense?
Incredible
Absolutely.
advice.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and you know, obviously from the perspective of the performance artist, extremely useful for our listeners, and I think as well, I'd love to know on behalf of our listeners if there might be some advice for anyone who might be interested in a career in casting. What would you tell them?
If somebody were interested in a career in casting, if they were in Los Angeles, if you notice after a casting director's credit on either film or television, you usually see three letters, CSA, and that's the Casting Society of America. So that's our professional association. It's not our union, it's our professional association. It's our sort of artistic meeting of all casting directors.
Mm-hmm.
We now run a program through one of the, I forgot what university we run it through, but we now run a program in Los Angeles to train people to go into casting. It's been around for about 2 years, 3 years. So that's one way of getting into casting. The other way is to figure out how you can get a job as an assistant in a casting office. Mm-hmm. Assistants are generally more clerical, but that's where you learn. I started off as an assistant, and I was doing it on electric typewriters. I was typing up deal memos and contracts and casting lists. But I got to observe a really amazing casting director's process and learn.
Yeah, you're still absorbing the information, aren't you? That you're, mm-hmm. That you're witnessing. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Fantastic. Well, Gary, thanks again for joining us on the Movie Mouth podcast this week.
No, my pleasure.
And
good questions.
And of course, if anyone's interested in Gary's oeuvre, you can look back at many of the movies that we've mentioned here, and of course, many of the TV series and shows that Gary has been a part of. But for now, thanks for joining us, and have a great evening.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, Gary.
Thanks.
How much did you enjoy that interview, Phil?
That was fantastic. It was really, really good to hear Gary's, insight into the world of casting and his experiences that he's had, which obviously sounds very varied, and some awesome stories he's got as well.
And and the future of productions post COVID as well, and how he's actually instrumental in kind of maintaining ongoing productions in this current climate, which is really interesting. I loved what you were saying about seeing Bruce Willis on the street in LA and then asking him about the Twilight Zone, and then ended up casting him in the kind of remake of that series was pretty fun.
Yeah.
And we're going to be bringing you more interviews with various individuals from different elements of the film and TV industry over the coming weeks. It's our hope here at the Movie Mouth podcast that we can shed more light on not just what you see in front of the camera, but also the hundreds of departments behind the scenes that bring our favorite movies to life, as well as how you can find your way into those industries. So this week on Video Store Corner, we're taking a look back at Quentin Tarantino's masterpiece, Pulp Fiction. So Phil, let's get straight into this. What are your thoughts on this movie?
Well, I don't think there's much more I can say about how awesome this film is and just how it still stands up today. I mean, I watched it again this week just to sort of refresh myself. It had been a few years probably since I watched it, but I absolutely love this film. Yeah.
It is a stone cold masterpiece. And same as you, I probably hadn't watched it in a couple of years. Although it's the kind of movie, if it's on TV, you'll kind of stick with it and probably see out a few scenes or watch till the end of the credits. But it's just such a reminder of how perfect movies can be. What would you say is your favorite scene?
I think there's a lot to enjoy in that. I think just because of the tension in it as well, the sex dungeon scene with Ving Rhames and Bruce Willis's characters
bring out the gimp.
Bring out the gimp. It's just so it's so full of tension. Like, they're just like, what the hell is going on? Mm-hmm. And I thought about it actually when I was watching it. I thought the bit where Butch, Bruce Willis's character, he manages to escape. He knocks out the gimp, and then he's going to run and leave Marcellus Wallace to his fate, which is unfortunate. But he decides to turn around, and he's sort of doing that weapon selection thing from behind the counter of the shop that they're in. And it's when he decides that he's going to use that sword, the samurai sword, and he's like edging down the stairs. And at the time, I thought about it this week when I was watching it. I was like, I just want this to. It's so tense. Like when he's going back down, you really want him to like get revenge.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to like fast forward it, like to the to see what happened. Even though I know what happens, I've seen it. I've seen it loads of time. But I love that scene. I think it's really good, and it's
the tension's incredible, and the sheer acting power of Bruce Willis in that scene when he walks out, he unlocks the door, and he's halfway out of the store, and he kind of stops, and then kind of looks back around. And he goes and he picks up the hammer. And then he kind of trades it up for the baseball bat. Then he trades it up for the mini chainsaw.
Yes,
and then, as you say, he sees that kind of quintessential now, Tarantino samurai sword. And
all
the
while the horrible noises are going on in the background, like the muffled sort of, and it's just like, oh, yeah.
It's funny. I was thinking about watching this again and thinking about Gary's comments on, Bruce originally auditioning for the Vincent Vega role that was eventually taken by John Travolta, and being disappointed at the start that he couldn't take that. And while I was watching it, a lot of the Vincent Vega roles, I was trying to see Bruce Willis in that performance, and I just couldn't see it. For me, the Jack Rabbit Slim scene, I know it's a cliche, but it's such an incredible scene between Vincent and Marcellus Wallace's wife, Mia. The fact that he's got to take out this kind of mob boss's wife. He's got to be courteous, and respectful, and he can't let anything happen in case he gets thrown out of a window into a greenhouse, like
4 stories down.
Yeah. So I think that's a great scene, obviously, and it's such a cliche, but also, another Bruce Willis moment. And it's weird because I never think of this as a Bruce Willis movie. Do you know what I mean? I never think of Pulp Fiction as a Bruce Willis movie, but
I'm always like, oh yeah, Bruce Willis is in that as well.
Exactly. And when you see him and you're like, all his scenes are great. He's got that suede bomber jacket on,
Yeah.
But the Butch Coolidge scene where, he leaves after the boxing fight because he's in a WBA fight against another fighter that he's supposed to throw, and of course he ends up not only knocking out his competitor but also killing him in the ring, obviously by accident. And we then see him escape out of a window and into a taxi, and then he eventually meets up with his French girlfriend in the motel, who rather weirdly desperately wants a potbelly and doesn't stop going on about having a potbelly until Butch Coolidge turns around to her and says, "If you had a potbelly, I'd punch you in it," which I find such a weird line.
It's a very odd line, yeah.
In this kind of like sexual moment where they're kind of about to make love, but that's life, and that's Tarantino, and I absolutely love all of the movies, so it's hard to pick a favorite.
Yeah.
And is there anything? This is going to be hard now thinking about this. It's like pulling teeth. But is there anything you don't like about this movie?
I really don't think there is. No, there's nothing I don't like about it. It's just such a watchable classic. It's just every performance in it is amazing.
And this movie makes me hungry to revert back to our question from last week. It starts with the breakfast scene, garçon, coffee, through to the Big Kahuna burger, through to the pancakes that Vincent's having. There's so much food in this movie. The
steak
coffee...
in the diner.
Yeah, that's right. Steak, bloody as hell. With a vanilla Coke, and then the burger, bloody with a $5 shake.
Yeah. Do you put any alcohol in that?
Yeah, $5. You put any alcohol in that? Obviously, with a great small cameo from Steve Buscemi as the waiter, Buddy Holly.
Buddy Holly, yeah,
which is awesome, or Bloody Holly. But no, I love those elements. I think for me, there's one thing that it's not a negative about this movie. One thing I really want to know why was Vincent Vega in Amsterdam for 3 years, and what was he doing there? I would love to know what John Travolta was doing in Amsterdam for 3 years, other than smoking pot and eating French fries with mayonnaise.
being what is essentially a hitman or was he doing the same thing? Who
Who
knows?
knows? Who knows? I would love to see, like a kind of spin-off of that. That would have
We have
been
to get
that would have been awesome.
Quentin on and ask him.
We absolutely will. Quentin, if you're listening, please pick up the phone, man. What would you say is your favorite Tarantino movie?
This is Pulp Fiction is definitely up there for me, but
Yeah.
I am a big fan of. I love Kill Bill.
Mhm.
I really like Django Unchained,
Mhm.
but I think just this whole catalog really is amazing. But Dusk Till Dawn is great as well. I love that. That's a good fun film.
Obviously, that was co-written by him and Robert Rodriguez, who directed it.
Yeah, that's right.
He's unhinged in that movie, though. Obviously, he has a starring role in that movie, and his acting's definitely better in From Dusk Till Dawn than it is as Jimmy in the Bonnie situation scene in Pulp Fiction.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's a bit wooden when he sort of gives his lines, and he's nuts as well. He's like properly nuts, but
wouldn't change that for the world, though. I love him being in there. It just gives such a flavor. Being it goes from basically being about this dead body in his garage to being about the fact that he doesn't want his wife to come home, find out, and then divorce him.
Yeah. And he doesn't want to give away his best linen to cover up bloodstains in a car because it was a wedding gift.
Yeah, but he forgets that his uncle Marcellus is a millionaire and he could buy him a whole new bed set. And I want to drink some of that gourmet coffee of his, lots of cream and lots of sugar, like Winston Wolfe. But yeah, this is. I mean, obviously, this is probably. It's probably my favorite. I also, and this is, people may be switching off in the droves when they hear this, but I also love Jackie Brown.
Yeah.
Samuel L. Jackson, Robert Forster, Robert De Niro in that movie, just absolutely incredible, incredible performances all round. But I absolutely love that movie. Also, the soundtrack, even Michael Keaton's in that movie, which you kind of forget that he's in there.
Yeah.
The soundtrack I love, the Delphonics and Cross 110th Street and all that kind of thing. But no, I'd say it's a tough one between Pulp Fiction and Jackie Brown. So that was Pulp Fiction. We don't tell you anything that you didn't already know. It's a masterpiece. If you haven't watched it in a while, after listening to Gary's interview, it's definitely worth picking up again and watching. On next week's Movie Mouth podcast, we'll be bringing you more of the same with news, reviews, interviews, and all the regular movie-related fun. But before we do, please follow our Facebook and Instagram accounts at Movie Mouth Podcast and hit subscribe or give us a nice 5-star review on your podcast player of choice. All that's left for me to say is, Phil.
Yes?
You remind me of the babe.
What babe?
The babe with the power.
What power?
The power of voodoo.
Hoodoo?
You do. Remind me of the babe. Bye, Phil.
See you later.